The year is 1457 BC. The Egyptian army has just arrived in the region called Yam, not far from the famous Carmel Mountains. It had been a long march and the troops were exhausted. Furthermore, the terrain was incredibly rough, much like the armies that General Merneptah had to face. In fact, it was so difficult for the troops to cross this area that many of them had to abandon their chariots. But the end of the journey was drawing near, and soon enough, the weary Egyptians would be able to rest. All they had to do was cross one last mountain pass called Aruna. It was a narrow path between high cliffs, just wide enough for a single chariot to pass through. On either side of the pass were steep drops of several hundred feet. Thutmose III's commanders looked at the path and unanimously declared it a death trap. They suggested going around, but that would take too long. The pharaoh needed to get to the other side as soon as possible. There was a small window of opportunity before the Canaanite king, who was his enemy, could raise his army and stop him. Besides, what choice did they have? If they turned back now, the Canaanite army would have more time to prepare for the coming battle. Turning back would also mean that all their supplies would have to be transported around, which would take weeks. And if they didn't have enough provisions to last that long, they'd all die of starvation before reaching the next river, so there was only one option left. But as the commanders argued about how dangerous the pass was, Thutmose remained silent, lost in thought. He knew that his army was exhausted and that going around would be the safest option. But something kept him from giving the order. Maybe it was the memory of his father, the great Thutmose II, who had died on the very same campaign, unable to capture the Canaanite capital, Megiddo. Or maybe it was the desire to make his own name resound throughout eternity, or perhaps it was simply the hot sun beating down on his head. Whatever the reason, the young pharaoh decided to take the risk. The element of surprise, he thought, was the key to victory. The Canaanites wouldn't expect them to come through the pass. It was too dangerous. No army in its right mind would attempt such a thing. So that's what they did. The entire Egyptian army marched through the narrow pass, man, woman, and child, along with all their provisions and war material. It took 2 whole days to get through the winding path, during which the soldiers had to constantly dodge rocks that fell from above. But finally, on the evening of the second day, the last Egyptian soldier emerged from the pass, and there below them stretched the Canaanite plain. The pharaoh's heart skipped a beat. His plan was working. The Canaanites hadn't even noticed their approach. In the morning, when the Canaanite king raised the alarm, it was already too late. Thutmose III's vanguards were already at the outskirts of the city. Startled, the Canaanite king sounded the retreat, but that was another mistake. His soldiers had been weakened by a long siege and were already exhausted. On top of that, the Egyptians had taken up positions on both sides of the city, blocking all escape routes, so the Canaanites couldn't retreat. And if they tried to fight, they'd be facing the most battle-hardened soldiers in the world. What followed was a massacre. The Canaanites didn't stand a chance. Their weapons weren't as sharp as the Egyptians, nor were their shields as strong. Most of them weren't even wearing helmets. And to top it off, they'd been weakened by a long siege. After 5 hours of fighting, the entire Canaanite army was wiped out. Not a single soldier was left alive. Even the king had fallen, pierced by 7 spears and arrows. Only the women and children were spared, though they, too, were taken prisoner. As for Thutmose III, he wasted no time in claiming the city for Egypt. He made sure that the walls were torn down so that it would be clear to anyone who dared defy Egypt that there was nothing left of the once mighty Canaanite army but a bunch of frightened prisoners. In the end, Thutmose's gamble had paid off. He had proven himself to be a great warrior, perhaps even greater than his father. Now all he had to do was return home and tell everyone that he had captured Megiddo. At least that's what he thought. But, as we'll see next time, the Battle of Megiddo was far from over. Hey guys, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave a like and subscribe for more fun history.